Encoding overloaded? How? Happens. Can happen, I guess. Uh, also, scene, scripts, start, close. There we go. Amazing. So good. Yeah. The last thing which happens when you something like that. Yeah. This. Okay, there we go. That's that. I don't know. I kinda actually hope it works. I have to say, I want it to work personally. I Yeah, I don't know. I think it will be actually quite pointless not to like say, oh no, let's let's hope that it works just for it to not be like that in terms of oh no, I think it's like isn't the essence of doing at least something of this sort, you know? Part of it is, yeah, I find it not I wouldn't describe it as necessary. I don't think that's the proper term. But at the very least, it's good. It's useful to actually want to do something like that. Otherwise, it's quite quite negative, you know. Not like you literally are impossibilitated from streaming, for example, but it is not the same if you don't have any interest at all in doing so. So, uh, anyway, let's see. I hope it works. Ba-da-ba-ba-bam-bam-bam. So yeah, that's my message. Thank you. Something else? I don't know. Many things. This thing, what? Suggested a collapse. It has started a new tower now. Wow. I We are so back. Twitch always striving for innovation or something like that. I don't think so actually, but Twitch always good with the sauce. I know. I I kind of forgot that Amazon has its own platform. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else. But I kind of forgot that yeah, Amazon has its own platform, and I wanted to test some. A test. I don't know what I have. Also, welcome, Sin. Hope you're doing well. We are testing internet. I hope it works. Uh, we have to hope. We have to trust the process. Uh, what? Ah, yeah. Let me open stuff here and let me. I guess it works. No, the audio is fine, right? Click to mute. No. Yeah, it works. It works. Ah. Also, I I forget that I don't have to whisper. So it's like an annoyance. Is it an annoyance? Not an annoyance. It's more like yeah, life makes you forget that you can project your voice or something like that. So you end up just not doing that particular activity. I guess I don't know, something like that. Point being, welcome. Uh, yeah, I had to open Gaso, Gaso 2. No, Godot Ensign, my favorite. My favorite. Uh, Also, why why is the noise sensitivity so high? Uh, no, the opposite, so low. Anyway, there we go. It works. Uh, We have been here almost 80 minutes. Not 5 minutes at least, yeah. But we have like 80 minutes always to test. I hope it's what? Encoding overload? What are you talking about? What? How? 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 Actually, how? What? Wait. Wait. Settings. I remember. No. I didn't do it myself. Bitrate 5000 preset. Slow. Good quality. Yeah. I had. No. I am so. Ah, I. I didn't realize that. Not that I didn't realize. I didn't check anything. When you have a graphics card, it comes with its own drivers. And one of the consequences of having a graphic card is it allows you to automatically adjust the stuff from the graphic yeah, from the graphics card menu. And I I clicked optimize. Oh yes, I was like, oh wow, going to be the best action that I will do in my whole life. And actually, it wasn't. It kinda is backfiring incredibly hard. Uh, at least the quality itself didn't change, so I'm happy with that. But I don't know what a what a wonderful existence. At least I don't know. Think how does the encoding get overloaded? No. Will that be an issue the whole stream? Will it explode if I dare to try play something? Why is it even like that? Anyway, it's literally my fault. I didn't fix anything because we're going to be having issues just because of that. It's so kino, so amazing as always. Man. Anyway, I know, I want. I know. Yeah, to some degree, I know, but I want water later on. That's like for the second part of this stream. It's not the second part, for like when we pause for a little bit. So that's a premonition or an anticipated upcoming event. Getting water. But anyway, yeah, it's what? Why am I not present? Hello. Okay, there it is. Here I am. Meow. Okay. Good evening. We're back. We are literally back. Exactly on the same space as yesterday. Hello. It was so funny. Internet crashed. I was watching the wall. It actually crashed. It's it's so you know when you when you when you when sorry, yeah, when it stops working like it should. I guess I don't know. It's like I wasn't actually expecting it to crash, but it happened anyway. So good, I guess. I don't know. I don't think so. To some degree, it's actually incredibly annoying, but it can happen. So it's fine. The point is here we are today. So whatever happened yesterday, that's in the past. Today we are even better. Today we are shining even brighter than yesterday. So yeah, um, I don't know things to say. As always, good morning, good evening, good not good night, good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon. We're basically going to continue encoding overload. Consider turning down video settings or using a fasting encoder. Thank you. Anyway, point being, I was saying, what? Yeah, that basically Encoding overloaded. Consider turning down video settings or using a faster encoding. Oh my god. It's going to be a problem. The call stream. Anyway, it's fine. It's fine. It's a consequence of my own actions. It's not so. How does the encoder get overloaded? What's the encoder? Isn't the encoder the thing that Twitch receives? No, right? No. Anyway, point being, it's me just trying to cope with the reality. We're going to continuing with what we were talking about yesterday. Basically, rapidly summing up everything that happened that was said. Luckily enough, yeah, I was checking, and despite the reality that indeed it was incredibly frustrating to not be capable of in itself finishing any explanation or anything like that in one single sitting, we can move on and finish them today. So, what are we trying to finish? Great, amazing question. We are looking at as continuing exactly correctly with the exact same thing that we were even working on yesterday, particularly. First concept is this thing called machines of certainty. That's where we left. That's the last thing that we were talking about. That's where we were actually trying to finish. And yeah, what's that about? What is the point of this particular? I wouldn't say discussion. It's more than anything else. Presumed concept, yeah. The final stage of the explanation was quickly summing up what we were talking about. This thing concept is a machine of certainty is any structure, any method, any system that we, in this case, we as humans have been capable of creating and sustaining throughout time to make it look like, or to assure certainty in regards to the different parts that surround our existence to some degree. That therefore means that we are talking about those things which certify reality and ensure us that it is in such a way. That's the most basic definition to some degree. Unavoidably, the caveats are notions like unavoidably. This is not about particularly other people so much, but rather about those external things that come with the existence of the human outside of its own person, so to speak. When we stop being just ourselves, when a creature such as a human stops just being centered on its ownness, so to speak, one of the notions that comes into play, that comes into light, is the reality that we are also surrounded by this degree of different systems that we're capable of putting into motion to allow us, without having so much to pass through the filter of the personal subjectiveness, to judge reality and to explain reality in what tries to be a more objective mode of understanding the world. That's a basic notion. That's the basic definition of what we're trying to talk about. Why is this, or why was this at all something that we should be concerning ourselves? The way in which the idea tries to come into play is very simple. Basically, it is about the reality of, yeah, luckily enough, one of the most wonderful aspects of getting to gain awareness about the nature of how we tend to operate ourselves in regards to these things is okay, because we try to create these machines of certainty, we go through different lengths to ensure that they might be as quote unquote objective as they might be, for the sake of, unavoidably, therefore, possessing as much of a correct view in regards to or according to what might be the real world. But one of the many notions that comes into play with this is this other realization that, yeah, in a way, we have learned or we have disregarded something that is unavoidable in this whole experience. When we try, when we are hoping and when we are constructing anything, it unavoidably goes through the filters, the different already given systems within any single person that structure the way in which we see the world. No matter how objective the notions that I possess might look like, they are still cemented at one instance or another to some extent, maybe not as big, maybe not as crude, maybe not as damaging, so to speak, but there is still a degree of modified behavior in relation to what I am trying to talk about as an objective notion. So, the more we try to create something of the sort of those machines of certainty without possessing the capacity to understand that still we are bound to a way of observing the world based on our subjective comprehensions, the more we end up arriving at further, far more subjective understandings of the world. At this point, it sounds to some degree very basic. It's not really anything. It's a very common judgment made on reality, so to speak. One of the most basic parts of deconstructionism, for example, as a reference point, is the analysis of how we have lost ourselves in the discourse of trying to do things that might be right without realizing that we ourselves are defining what is right beforehand. We do not possess a fully objective measurement of what could be called the righteous thing, but rather we are far more mobilized, moved, capable of desiring and inspired to be acting towards those given impressions of what we judged as the correct kind of righteous thing. This became such a problem that it was necessary to be capable of finally stepping, even if it is just for a little bit, even if it is just one tiny step, trying to step outside of the personal boundaries so that we can observe that, yeah, indeed, we are not as capable of understanding the objective world or getting an utterly unbiased picture, so to speak. So, in a way, we have kept evolving in accordance to many other technologies, technological advances, and the way in which we have progressed as a or as multiple civilizations all together in this current world, yeah. And one of the realities of that is, but yet we have not been truly capable of getting rid of this subjective machines of what we tried to believe was certainty. So instead of it being about a machine of proper certainty, a machine of objectiveness, a thing which gets to define the world as what it is without any other interference from the outside, not only are we, from a human perspective, not only I as a person can make understandings, get to reasonings about the world, which I myself could get to identify if I were to ignore, so to speak, so much my own personal condition as subjective. The moment in which I can allow myself to look from outside of my own person to what the things that I am trying to talk about, and the moment in which I put some effort into observing with some seriousness what am I trying to define as an objective interpretation, I can then see that it might have been subjective. But that happens because to some degree there is still a working enough mind that can interpret everything else. Now, when we have around us so many of these machines of certainty ensuring us that the world is in such a way, and that's why also when I was trying to define it before, not today, one of the useful definitions is also the concept of it's not just a machine in itself in the more brutal sense. You can also conceptualize a machine as any kind of system that plays in accordance to this purpose, because the issue becomes that the different things which allow the certainties which we assume are correct to exist, and the different systems which ensure that these things get perpetuated, they too have found themselves to be already persuaded by certain modes of subjective interpretation of the world. And this, the final conclusion is, therefore, unavoidably, sadly, we live in a reality in which all the levels of awareness, all the levels, it's the correct world, or the correct word, sorry, it's not so much this thing of, yeah, I have my own levels of understanding and I have my own degree of realizations and I can get to somehow make sense out of what is happening and whatnot. And my consciousness expands. It's not about so much just consciousness. It's beyond the realm of consciousness, so to speak. It's the issue of we, as thinking animals, have created those things that, without possessing any thinking faculty themselves, structure and dictate what is then assumed or interpreted by the majority as the correct ways of exercising awareness and exercising therefore consciousness of any kind. This issue is so prevalent even in nowadays world that many of the preconceived notions and modes of approaching the world which we presumed was a certain way have been biased since long enough. One of the useful critiques that always comes into play with all of this is the realization that, yeah, one of the correct methods, even if not in its wholeness, it was the most adequate mode of interpretation of reality and the most adequate way of understanding what the world is and what not. There is this idea of cogito or yeah, cogito ergo sum, which indicates that yeah, to some degree, because we think we possessed after the capacity of thinking, the capacity to be anything, and because we can think for ourselves, we get to then make sense out of the rest of our surroundings. In a way, it is just stepping back, but at the same time, also welcome. At the same time, it is still just the exact same discussion in which we have. I wouldn't just define it as a philosophical issue. It is something that is far more related to the general experience of we as human beings. Because we do not get to properly observe and properly or more objectively think out the world, we are bound to be, in a way, driven towards. It doesn't necessarily conclude in the wrong conclusions, wrong futures. It is probably more along the lines of we suddenly have a little bit more of we might be steering away from what seems to be the concept of yeah, we desire to aspire to objectiveness when in reality we do not get to be there. We are rather steering into a different direction, I will admit. Also, I saw it and sorry for not allowing it earlier, but yeah, probably if you're the same guy, sorry for not remembering the name, but yeah, I remember the comment. Yeah, it's fine, don't worry. Just sit back and relax, eh, son? Yeah, it's all good. Ah, today we're talking about what? Great question. We're talking about consciousness. Philosophy? I don't think it is philosophy. I think the discussion of philosophy might be a little bit different. What what's the proper tag about this discussion? No idea. Um, Analysis, text analysis, something along those lines, probably. Great. Yeah, I don't actually know how to define it. Point is, yeah, we are just in the. I wouldn't say discussion as always. It's just explanation of concept and all of that. And yeah. Also, taking into consideration that I did a pause for a second, let me drink some water. Thank you. Also, yeah, one of the continuing. Anyway, one of the things that does happen that comes into play that becomes part of the world after we create these things which in words come to play the role of objective judges of the world, in reality are just biased towards different systems that we already have accepted into our lives because this has become such a norm. Not only are we the logical consequences we have given up some agency because unavoidably we don't have the capacity to by ourselves understand that, yeah, sadly, it's not possible to be so capable of just in itself being when other things ordain and already define what being itself means, when there is this other weirder layer of, and this mode of being itself is also subjective to some things which no one here can actually directly interact with. These things which define a reality, so to speak, are not so much about reality itself, but rather they are about everything else that has to do with reality. They are just, in a way, it's a simile, but the concept of we are already in the coffin. Maybe it is some dark imagery, but we're already in the coffin. And because we find ourselves in that place, what happens sadly is that by creating so many machines of certainty which in our minds function for our own benefit, in reality just perpetuate our previous judgments and ensure that we stay in the exact same places of observation about what the nature of the world is. What we are therefore doing only is moving forward into a future in which, to some degree, the only thing that will matter, trying to be, I don't think it is a good idea always. It is, in a more general sense, one of the most wonderful parts of getting to hear so many people talk is how, in every single field, it's wrong to try to predict the future. Why? Because in reality, it's quite impossible to actually do so accurately enough. The world itself always changes shapes in accordance to things which escape the observations of the predictor, so to speak. But in this case, it is something that goes outside of the just human factor. The different systems which order the whole world in which we live ourselves is filled with those other things which are far more related to not exactly anything associated with objectiveness, but rather all of the already given things make it work, make the efforts which any human puts into striving for any particular goal be ensured to guarantee a perpetuation of these very same systems in a way, in the hope of arriving at an objective view of the universe. What we have done so irreversibly enough, and what we are ensuring that is going to happen in the end, is to keep on moving just in the same direction as before, and to keep on headed straight forward to the exact same place which we were trying to escape. That's unavoidably therefore being subjectiveness, and us only being capable of living bounded by all the subjective things of the human beings. Now, at this point, the conclusion is sort of given, but at the same time, what this is sort of also one of those final things that I was trying to comment or to say yesterday before we were interrupted. One of the realities of this also is, sadly, this doesn't mean that we are no more required. The issue is always because we are bound to be subjective already, even in these current times. No creation of ours might be objective enough by itself, even if it might seem a little enough. The different influences that we might exert onto our creations might already codify them and force them to work in different ways, which will just lead to any other consciousness brought forward through our efforts as also bounded to the same subjective problem. It doesn't mean also that, as a caveat inside of the caveat, it doesn't mean that it is necessary to not try to create anything like that. The issue is, it would be easier for us as a species, I guess, is the proper way of seeing it, to finally come back into the considerations of, yeah, we are still in time, and we can still try to correct the course. It's, even if the prediction before was, as long as we're headed towards the same direction, we're only going to end into far more subjective views of the world. And it doesn't mean that it is now late and that we will never have the capacity to get rid of subjectivity if we were to try. At least right now, it is not a door that we have closed for us humans, so to speak. And it would, if once again implied that we actually need objectiveness, or that we truly desire it as a fundamental part of our own lives, if that were to be what we're aiming at, then we need to go back and start working towards the removal of the different subjective views which we have accepted and normalized as correct ones or useful ones. Because if there is something that this world cares about, it is not just about the contentment of the soul, the happiness that we get to experience and whatnot, but also about the usefulness of things. If something isn't useful, it gets discarded far more rapidly, because it isn't therefore necessary. If something is useful, it can be considered as necessary. If it isn't, it also loses the condition of necessity. It does not necessitate to be something that we occupy our efforts on. So, if we can gain in some way the aim of going back to our subjectiveness, then we might somehow remove the different machines that have already been cemented onto reality, and then finally advance towards the eternal desire for a fully objective worldview. Once again, issue is this is not just about the machines themselves in their most basic infantile conception. It also is about the different systems that exist in the world and the different sediments that we have already given to our civilizations that force subjectiveness as the correct method of existence. If it somehow it were to happen that we could arrive at a more objective view, it will not be just because, for example, we disavowed something like technology. It's not a reductionism of the idea to that level. But anyways, it's just, I think everything about this point has been said thus far, but yeah, it's about that basically. We have those things which we utilize outside of our own realm of consciousness, because we have, luckily enough, we were capable of understanding that, yeah, human consciousness is in some way bound to be subjective. And because we said that we needed, that we wanted to be more objective, we created these things which reside outside of the consciousness. But at the same time, those very same systems, those very same machines, have also fallen onto the trap of subjectiveness and serving different masters for the sake of ensuring the security of even higher systems. In this case, it's something that goes along the lines of what is most times certain is also what most times serves the thing in power itself. I guess, yeah. I wouldn't want to actually deepen that particular sentence, but yeah, that's a very basic view on why these machines of certainty are so established in the present world. And yeah, we are still, as always, one of the basic, of the fundamentalist ideas out of this is, if we can discuss them, if we have the possibility of talking about them as we are doing right now, in which we might even say that we are disparaging about these negative things, it also can happen that we can try to eliminate them. Even even just the existence of a thought like this one is an indicator that the system itself, which otherwise could be defined as perverse in the eyes of someone else, still has not gotten a hold of everything that dictates reality, as to not even let the inhabitants of it come to the realization that, yeah, there is this thing which controls them, luckily enough, consciousness has not yet been disavowed in their current form, despite us still once again having understood from a different perspective that it might not be the best thing. But yeah, that's pretty much the basic explanation. And also, as always, other things also given. Us getting to understand that, yeah, luckily enough, we also do possess those other layers of reality. There are those other things that can somehow alter and inform and modify how we see the world, and that we might need to work in the removal of those things if we were to truly wish to possess something that isn't as subjective anymore. Perhaps one of the issues, let's say like this, final point of this incredibly external or lengthy, sorry, this incredibly lengthy discussion is one of the issues of objectiveness is the realization that without the subject being a part of the world, there is no observer that can at all see things and utilize their efforts on. There is, without a subject, there is no predicate. Both are necessary to make things function in the way in which we have understood them so far. So, it does seem like there could perhaps exist a world in which we might live great lives, even if we are utterly subjective. We have not yet fully argumented those, and we have not yet gotten to understand throughout the different cultures of this world how this might be. But perhaps that's that's the eternal chanting of those who have seen the history of humanity. All things considered, we are quite a young civilization, so perhaps once we can fully embrace subjectivity, things might change. I wouldn't risk saying for the better, but yeah, things might change. Just like they did when we understood what it was for the first time. Exactly in the same way. So yeah, that's the first topic, yeah. Yes, that's exactly the first topic and all that there is for that. As always, no? This was a continuation of what we were trying to talk about yesterday. Not much else. So, if it didn't seem all that understandable, it also is necessary to go back and look into what was said yesterday. But anyways, moving on. Progressing a little bit more towards something completely different. The second topic was I I tried to establish it yesterday. I know now I can admit it wasn't a correct explanation of what it is about at all. But yeah, there is something funny. Where next discussion is about what I titled Humble Survival. There is, let me present it exactly in the same way in which I realized that something funny happens when you see the life of most of those who have tried to understand the world, who have come to pass as important figures in the efforts of understanding the nature of the different aspects of the human life. There is an unavoidable factor of suffering, and there is an unavoidable degree of struggle always involved in all those figures. And there is something, I wouldn't call it revealing, that could be observed if we tried. That's the definition of the thing. There is something that could lend itself to analysis if we wanted, and that is that there seem to be some things which operate not exactly in accordance to nothing else, but rather that work in the life of any human being who desires to attain laborious realms of satisfaction, inescapable struggle. And we're gonna start this discussion with one of the many necessary learnings that most people who have come to live long lives can understand. Is it's necessary to build character, to mold your character into something, and to get to be someone. It doesn't even mean that you need to be someone great, just to be someone. The concept itself is to generate that thing which makes us continue moving forward. The issue is there is also another layer onto that, and that is in accordance to what is the person, what are we ourselves, it's also quite necessary for us to be capable of experiencing those unpleasant parts of life because they are part of the human experience. The universal human experience always has a portion of displeasure, and it can even fall under the realms of suffering. But any struggle or displeasure that presents itself comes also with one other thing accompanying its existence, and that is the reality of when we have to face things of that sort, when we as a human being, when let me rephrase it, when I have to face a challenge in life which might require most of myself, if I fail to comprehend what lengths do I need to go to in order to achieve what I want, if I fail to actually be capable of understanding and actually be capable of contextualizing why am I experiencing the things that I am experiencing, if that happens, I will then, besides the already negative experience, have even more bad sensations. And at that instance, it does come the aspect of I get overwhelmed by what happens, and if the concept is about survival, I might not be capable of powering through the situation, getting through the situation, through enough to some degree, to some other. Something that also happens is, but luckily enough, I can, utilizing my energies in any particular way. It's not out, oh no, yeah, this is the one way that matters, or this is the one way that is correct. In the action of aiming towards something that makes sense for me, I contextualize what am I going through, and I gain what might be necessary to keep on moving forward. What in other versions of the analysis of the human character might find itself defined as resilience, resistance, no, yeah, resistance, and will to live, even. Here is just the explanation of, because the negative experience is bound to be in life. But the understandable concept is that, yeah, what matters is me actually possessing a reasonable enough way of approaching the situation so that I can traverse it and achieve what is necessary of me, or what I conceive as a goal from doing so. Now, so far it doesn't seem at all to include the concept of humbleness. Why is that on the title even of this discussion if there is no mention of it so far? Great observation, unavoidably, and also, yeah, there is a degree of humbleness that does come into play with all of this. The greater the struggle, the bigger the abandonment of the personal world that we have to do. in order to be capable of moving towards our goals. The meaning which we give to the things that we do in accordance to the actions that we express as desires require wider levels of abstraction once situations become dire enough. It's not about the concept of, oh yeah, I need to compare myself to feel better. It's not that particularly. It's the reality of, yeah, I cannot survive a hurricane just because I want to eat a candy tomorrow. It's not as simple as that. It's not me being capable of possessing a reason, all that there is to survive any hardship. It also is about when something complex enough comes, I do also have some degree of agency in regards to what I determine to be the reason as to why I decided to go through that negative experience, but I also have the obligation to define something meaningful enough to myself to be capable of getting through that fully. The issue is that when I try to do such a thing, if the aspiration that I set takes into consideration things which might find themselves also affected by the negative situation, it's not so surprising. I'm talking about things in a way too abstract mode, but let me finish the sentence. My survivability rates get decreased. Illustration of this is going back to, let's say that I do want a candy hard enough to try to power through a storm, a hurricane big enough to destroy everything else around me. If even the candies which I want get swept onto that hurricane, so that I lose the thing which I have aside, which I possess as an object of desire, which I use to anchor myself towards the necessity to power through the negative, the adverse experience. If even that lacks, then yes, I will. It's not just about suffering. I will abandon my efforts. Even final analysis. Unavoidably, anybody who said something that also gets swept when things become bad enough loses their capacity to keep on moving forward. Issue is yet at the same time, not only is this a very ideal concept in terms of the explanation that we're giving it, but there is also another layer about how this operates in the real world. Let's say, let me a different example this time myself. If I say that I want to, I don't know, get to 1,000 streams for the sake of demonstrating that I can actually utilize my energy in something that I enjoy. Okay, but one of the conditions which I never realized before was necessary was my personal possession of a voice, my capacity to think about the stuff in the way in which we do here, as an obligation, as an obligatory condition for the perpetuation of this struggle, which in itself isn't bad, but still can be something removed from the equation if something else were to affect that. If in an instant hardship negative enough comes and I were to lose my speech, my capacity to speak, unavoidably worst condition of them all, my own life, it would therefore lead to the abandonment of the goal. It will unavoidably lead to the surrendering towards the thing which was otherwise so desired and so anticipated and sought after. Because the reality is that even if I was not capable of conceiving those as conditions that I was supposing were mandatory for my continuation of efforts, even if those were to be the case, I could fully find myself distraught and damaged by the consequences of the negative events which could affect those very same foundational parts for what constitutes my reason to be, or my justification for continuing to move forward. So it also, that's where the humbleness comes into play, to be capable of understanding how much we find ourselves attached to things, and to be capable of understanding and putting into the presence of our minds what are those other components of what we are defining as our goal, what we have implied needed to keep on happening without actually explicitly expressing them as necessary. Like, I don't know, for example, no? I want to be one day a great painter. In many ways, the most logical explanation is, but if I say something like that, it doesn't mean that I'm trying to be a great painter after I die, unless I can actually come to the realization that I am willing to go to that length. If I want to be a great painter, I will never know if I was a great painter after I died. I want to be a great painter while I am alive. If I want to be a great painter, I need to be capable of painting things that others like. I need to understand my public. I need to be capable of creating things that others define as beautiful and capable enough of coming from a great painter, so that I, correctly enough, earn that title myself too. There are many things which compose what we later on come to define as the object of our desire. And there are many of those things which we have assumed were necessary, not just for ourselves, but also for all the other surrounding aspects of our life. And only if we can truly become aware of those things, it is that then we can proceed with the next step, and that is once I have in front of me those other conditions that I have silently made necessary, I can then see, am I willing to depart from these things, or are they so much necessary for my goal? How much of my goal actually can come to be if these things are not present? How much of what I want can be achieved if what I say that I desire had other parts in self that desire itself present, which I had to give up on because I assume that I actually want to achieve what I want. And that's the slow process of humbling oneself. I slowly get to decompose and dispose what are my actual goals. And I get to survive more things. The more I can purify that which I say keeps me going. And this, once again, this isn't just, oh no, yeah, this is my personal experience. As always, it tries to be also the concept of every single person possesses that possibility. It doesn't sound, it's, it will be not just unfair, but irrational to say, oh no, yeah, only I can do something of that sort. The reality is unavoidably every single person. As long as we are striving towards the recognition of those aspects which compose our vision in itself, as long as that comes to be, as long as that happens, then we can slowly get to understand what are we doing, and then we can slowly start to remove what might hinder an actual struggle towards the goal that we want to achieve. And also, in a different layer, there is this other aspect of the humbleness, which is the unavoidability of, and sometimes I will have to dispose of things that otherwise I did imply that they were present, but by saying that they are no more necessary, I have to actually give up a lot of myself. Once again, going back, previous example was, or one of the many was, I want to be a great painter. Can I actually be willing to throw away my whole life to paint something great enough for the sake of getting one day randomly recognized by someone else after I have already died? What do I do if my recognition comes only after I have lost my own life? Can I have an actual reason to justify my efforts for such a thing? Can I actually make sense of such a struggle? Can I accept that maybe I say that I want to be an artist just of that sort, of such level of greatness, even if it takes more than all the time that I have to keep on living? and dedicate the rest of my existence to live in misery just because I want to be a great artist? Why would I say something of that sort? And with which reasons can I convince myself, not now in the moment of the analysis, of the first analysis, tomorrow, or a year from now, or a decade after I have been struggling towards this thing? It is in discussions of this sort that one also requires humbleness, because one has to accept that the reasons given are sufficient enough, and one also has to be capable of departing with enough things so that it does make sense and does not lead to the either the disavowal of our hopes and the abandonment of what we said that we wanted to achieve, nor to the whole destruction of all the efforts that we made when that unavoidable negative event comes. And the part that is found everywhere else in the history, that's what I started this particular discussion with. Something that you can identify once you also start to explore histories of previous civilizations and previous participants of this world and such other great figures or whatever it is. Not everybody wants to have a great time, but what matters is not so much, in many instances, the present itself which we are living, which can be fully bounded to miserableness. One of the most hard to fully grasp realities, even for the modern person, is that, yeah, we take a long time to actually grow up into this concept of an adult, as we call it. Many things during that time which we always experience as present, which then we get to refer as a past, can be incredibly negative. But what matters is not so much the present always. What matters is also that other thing which lies in the future. What is it that we're actually striving to get in the future done? One of the concepts, I wouldn't say that it defines every single adult, but that ensures that we get to find ourselves experiencing that realm of adulthood, is that we decide to just not to be immersed only in the now. Even if it does matter, it's not a complete abandonment of the present, it's the reevaluation of, yeah, and sometimes it's necessary to actually just let it be, even if things are bad. Maybe today, for example, I think it is unavoidably hard to understand, because we don't find ourselves in that particular position, but it could happen otherwise that, I don't know. Going back to what happened yesterday. Yesterday we weren't here. As much as I wonder, because internet failed. And just because of that, there is always a possibility. It doesn't mean that it is a necessity to take advantage of. But there is always the possibility of disparaging against everything else that there is and saying, what? I wanted to be here so much. I had so many things to talk about. And I did not get to express myself. Fucking going on a hiatus. Abandoning all my efforts. The world doesn't comply to my desires. The instant in which I say that I want something, I give up. I will never again stream because it's not happening the way in which I wanted. It also is stuff of that sort that one needs to be capable of dealing with. Those experiences that are not exactly negative, that's to some degree a different conversation, how we are capable of interpreting what happens as either negative or positive, based literally on the outlook that we have towards the experiences themselves and our personal disposition, but rather it also is about just the willingness to keep on moving towards the goals, despite those hiccups existing. Anybody can. It does make it sound like it is just reduced to willfulness, but yeah, it is a formula that we haven't fully explained so far, that yeah, we're actually capable of surviving a lot of things. Even if I wanted to be a great painter, even if I wanted to be as many days present and many accidents impeded me from doing so, and many things robbed me of my capacity of making the most beautiful piece of art ever created. There are some other things still to try. And the issue is also in there, in the humbleness to recognize that not because a hiccup happened, not because a negative experience came, everything now is lost. The first issue is to set any goal that doesn't get destroyed so rapidly. Then the realization that, yeah, in some cases, what we have perceived as a problem was rather from a subjective point of view of our analysis about the situations and saying, no, yeah, you know what? This thing, it might be good. I don't give a fuck, brother. I'm tired already. I am incredibly exhausted already. I don't want to do this anymore. And at that point, yeah, it is a responsible act to be capable of accepting that it was a personal choice also to not keep on moving towards the completion of what we wanted. Or otherwise, then, yes, finally getting to change plans, completely modify the way in which we are approaching the things that we want, and absolutely modify the behaviors that we are using and that we are accepting as necessary, that we are implementing for the sake of achieving what we said that we wanted. There is it 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 sounds a little bit external, but let me explain it. I remember having heard about that, and I think it comes fully into play here. Just have patience. It takes a while to get to the point, but there is something that I remember having heard about very recently. It was in relation to how, instead of many games, there are these things called sets of situations that are solved and unsolved. And instead of that discussion, something came that was how great one game is because of the unknownness of it compared to this other game that is far more popular, because in a way it is far more explored already and far more solved already. One of the things that I think we fail the most to understand is that even if things get called meta, most stable, standard, utilized strategy, tactic for the completion of our goals, what the rest has experienced doesn't mean that every single one of us goes through the exact same situation. And what does this have to do with what I was talking about before? It's simple enough. Sadly, we think that even more with great issues, big problems in life, because they take so much effort, it's necessary to utilize only what has always worked. And sometimes there is something incredibly funny inside of all of that. The bigger the goal that we set and the issues that come along that goal, the more present that becomes. In cases, it even becomes literally about just giving up. In the common lore of humanity, it is far easier. It has been the meta to do something that lets the person survive, even if it means that we are completely destroyed in the process, even if our spirits get utterly shattered. That's better than to actually get to accomplish what we want, because it is better to find something else we can tell ourselves. But sometimes it also is about, maybe I do want a thing, maybe I do wish for a certain something, to be a certain way, a certain goal to get fulfilled. Maybe I don't need to hear so much what gets defined as the norm. It's cool to be that I put things at a risk, but it also is something that I can accept because I can understand that what I want requires such things also. And that's part of the experience. It's a bigger issue because sometimes it can even be described about the delusional archetype of the person who endlessly starves themselves. The thousand, the million cases of artists all throughout the world, even nowadays, who suffer because they also strive for greatness. It doesn't mean that it's also time to just jump ahead and kill myself with the utmost dedication to the thing that I want the most, but rather out understanding there can always be a way in which I could make things work. The issue is I need to actually find it, and I need to actually utilize my time in making it become, I wouldn't just say apparent, I would rather define it as observable for me to coherent enough so that I can actually use it in my efforts. And then that would allow me to, despite how hard my dream is, attain that thing which I want and go through the hard situation. But once again, that doesn't happen if I don't have the capacity to accept that, yeah, I might need to try 1,000 different things. I might need to spend a million hours before I actually get to find the correct one, the method that finally works, you know? That's the issue here. Also, that yeah, it is about the survival. It is possible to go through even the harshest of situations, but only if we can actually put a part of ourselves in the process. It doesn't happen. Okay, today I finish sharing this. Tomorrow, a very the most ridiculous example. Tomorrow, I lose in an online video game. My goal was to win. Therefore, time to end everything that there was because I failed once. No, it's not just the possession of the knowledge. It also is about understanding how that works. Actually, getting to see that come to light in our own life. It's not so much of a quote unquote lesson as they would like to call it, but rather another concept to keep on digesting until it finally gets somewhere also for us. Yeah, it's good to know that things can be survived, but how much are we willing to struggle until that happens? Also, thankfully enough, I got to say most of what I wanted. So it's a good point to actually finish today because yeah, we are back to the struggle machine. We are finally lagging again, but yeah, we got to we got to say everything as always. Good luck making sense out of what is said. Thanks for the time, the interest, the patience, the attention. That's what matters. And yeah, see us next time. I have to actually think about it. I haven't tried to organize the bar, but if it keeps malfunctioning like this, perhaps it's not going to happen. I don't know. That's my issue to solve, not yours to worry about. So yeah, anyways, thank you for everything. Has been